In a room without a single window, Hukum murmured, "I already warned them. He's not human." Even though he didn't take a step outside, Hukum was aware of what was going on inside the Xiaolialayan temple. Several monks from the Xiaolialayan temple were dying every day. This senseless slaughter will never end until all of the living things in the Xiaolialayan temple are killed. You can never catch him in a normal way. Hukum murmured and looked at the workstation in front of him. Naked children who looked to be about 10 years old were lying on his workstation. They were referred to as the wolf children in the Xiaolialayan temple. These wolf children were those who had been abducted from nearby villages. There were quite a few crazy people in the Xiaolialayan temple, besides Hukum. One of them was Mokwan. Mokwan injected various drugs into the kidnapped children to increase their physical abilities. Since it would take a long time to lay the foundation and pass on basic martial arts, one way to improve the physical abilities of a child in a short period of time is through drugs. As he expected, the children's bodies developed at a very rapid rate. But there were some problems. While the body might become suitable for learning martial arts, the mind became weak. A fragile mind was bound to interfere with learning martial arts. So Mokwan came up with a terrible plan. He made all the children fight each other in front of their parents. Then the parents of the children who would lose were all killed. As this situation was repeated several times, the children's minds were thoroughly destroyed. Their human emotions are worn out, and only their destructive desires remain. It's exactly what Mokwan wanted. He passed on one of the martial arts of the Xiaolialayan temple to the children. It was the demonic art of Guanyin too, which was the inverse interpretation of the Shaolin Temple's Guanyin. Theoretically, the technique could exert tremendous power, but in reality it was impossible. This is because the demonic art of Guanyin is an incomplete martial art. The essence of the demonic art of Guanyin is that it stimulates the human brain, unlocking its full potential, and thus exerting great power. But the human brain is not as simple as anyone might think. While the brain's potential is limitless, if a person unlocks all of its abilities, then the brain itself would not be able to stand the pressure, making it melt. This is the reason why the human brain places a limit on itself. It prohibits itself from exerting abilities beyond a certain level. As long as there is a limit set by the human brain, it is impossible to overcome the demonic art of Guanyin. Even if a person succeeds, there is no guarantee that his brain would remain safe. If he makes even one mistake, there is a high possibility that he will become a person who does not have even a handful of reasons left. That's why any sane monk would not dare dabble on the demonic art of Guanyin. It was only Mokwan who was crazy enough about the demonic art of Guanyin that he ended up researching the said topic on children. However, his research was lagging behind. Even though he had already blown away the rationality of the children, he was able to make them break through the limits of their brain. "Are you really able to break through the wolf children's limits?" A small person approached and looked up at Hukum. The owner of a face as ugly as Hukum was Mokwan. "Yes. It's possible if it's me." "Really? Have you forgotten what my specialty is?" "Kikik. Manipulating human minds is your specialty. So what's the connection?" "To manipulate the human mind, you must first take control of the brain." It was then that Mokwan's eyes lit up. He knew what Hukum was aiming for. Extraordinary. So, you're trying to forcefully lift the limit by manipulating their minds. But if you do, their brain will collapse because they can't stand the excessive pressure. It's still worth a try. Think of the wolf children whose limits have disappeared. The senses of their whole body will obviously develop abnormally. If that happens, they will be able to find the assassin who is hiding like a rat. So that was your purpose. Finding and getting rid of the assassin. That's how it is. Heh heh. I like it. Mokwan smiled sullenly. The wolf children were children who had not yet matured. No matter how strong they were because of the various drugs, their physical abilities were inferior to that of the monks. If the limits of such a child were suddenly lifted, their brain and body could not bear the effects and their ego could collapse. If something goes wrong, all the dozen wolf children whom Mach 1 had painstakingly raised will die. Nevertheless, Mach 1 willingly participated in the plan of Hukum. It was because his research hasn't had any further development anyway. Mach 1 didn't feel any regrets despite putting all of his heart and soul into making the wolf children for several years. There would always be new children available somewhere. Hukum approached the children. "It's a pity that I abandoned that girl. She was the best ingredient." Hukum regretted leaving one Jia young alive. But it was impossible to go back. He now had to focus on the children. To catch a demon, we need to create our own demon too. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Heilbel was sitting cross-legged on the highest platform. With his eyes closed, red mist was swirling all over his body. The red mist that was swirling around his body formed into the shape of a dragon. It was a phenomenon that only occurred when the greatest martial arts of the Xiaolian Temple, the supreme layer of the Heavenly Dragon 3, was executed. Ever since the Xiaolian Temple was established in Namling Forest, there were only about 3 people who had learned more than the composition of the supreme layer of the Heavenly Dragon. With such capabilities, they all completely ruled over Zizingjianghu. Heilbel became the first Buddhist monk to completely master the supreme layer of the Heavenly Dragon. As he opened his eyes, the red dragon that was spinning around his body was absorbed into his nostrils and disappeared. Who? Although Heilbel made great progress, his expression was still not at ease. It was because of the assassin who roamed the interior of the Xiaolian Temple like it was his own house. Because of a single assassin, the entire Xiaolian Temple was shaken. It was like a clear crystal pond had become muddy water because of one loach. If the assassin named Pilwul continues, no fish will be able to live in the huge pond called the Xiaolian Temple. Until now, Heilbel had left the monks under his command to search for the assassin on their own. He expected that they would be able to overcome such an ordeal. However, contrary to his expectations, they still haven't caught the assassin. Furthermore, the damage and fear brought by the assassin to the Xiaolian Temple only continued to grow. They really had to find and destroy the assassin before it was too late. But there was one strange thing. Why the hell is he aiming for our sect? What kind of grudge does he have with us? Hukum only told him that an assassin was chasing after him. Hukum didn't tell Heilbel why, because even Hukum also does not know the reason. He would have never thought it was because of a prostitute who died in the hands of Seo Munpyong. Heilbel stopped thinking there. There were as many as the stars in the sky who had a grudge against the Xiaolian Temple. Some of them may have achieved what they are today with exceptional talent. Perhaps another sect who was jealous of the Xiaolian Temple may have contacted him. Anyway, we just have to catch the assassin. Then we will be able to find out who's behind him. That was then. Heilbel. Hukum asks to see you. The voice of a monk standing guarding outside was heard. For a moment, a deep displeasure appeared on Heilbel's face. All of the things that happened so far arose because Hukum came with someone chasing after him. Because of him, all of the Xiaolian Temple monks, including the demon blood monks, did not like Hukum. Furthermore, after returning to the Xiaolian Temple, Hukum hid in his dwelling and did not appear. They heard that he was plotting something together with Mach 1, the head of the wolf children, but the details have not been reported yet. Come on in. As soon as Heilbel gave permission, the door opened and Hukum entered. When Hukum entered the room, he immediately prostrated himself before Heilbel. I see the great monk of the Xiaolian Temple. What did you come here for? There is a way to catch the assassin. Hukum answered in a confident voice. How? I lifted the restriction on the wolf children. So? An interesting thing happened to them. We can use them to catch an assassin. Are you sure? Why would I lie to the sect leader? I'm even willing to risk my life. Hukum grinned. A black mist engulfed the body of Hukum, but Heilbel knew he was smiling. There weren't many cases where Hukum showed his confidence to this extent, so Heilbel was curious. Risk your life? I didn't see his face even once while he was chasing me. No one can imagine the disgrace I felt at that time. The assassin thoroughly used Hukum. He pushed Hukum into a corner while showing that he could kill him at any time. The memories of that time were so shameful that Hukum did not want to recall them again. Because of that, even after returning to the Xiaolian temple, he couldn't sleep. He had spent many nights staying up with his eyes open. He was trembling, not knowing when the assassin would come. If he fails to kill the assassin, he'll have to suffer without ever being able to escape from his shadow, so he went to Mokwan and asked him if he could lead the wolf children to him. I planned to break the wolf children's prohibition against demonic art of Guanyin. And I was half successful. Are you sure? I will die anyway if I fail. So I'm willing to risk everything. Thud. Hukum hit his head on the floor and answered. The assassin, who entered the Xiaolian temple, chased Hukum. That meant that the situation would probably be over if he died. So Hukum risked his life for this matter. Hyalbul looked at Hukum for a moment without saying a word. The resolution of Hukum was conveyed. You're going that far as to risk your life? If a subordinate says that he was willing to stake his life, and he fails, then he would lose his face. Hyalbul rose from his seat. He gave orders to the monks guarding his dwelling. Summon all of the disciples to the full moon hall right now. All right. The order of Hyalbul was delivered to all of the Xiaolian temple disciples at once. Even though they were puzzled by the sudden order, they all gathered in the hall. Although the disciples were in a mess because of the assassin, the order of Hyalbul in the Xiaolian temple was absolute. The full moon hall was so huge that even the former monks of the Xiaolian temple could gather. In addition, the interior can be seen at a glance because there are only thick pillars supporting the ceiling, with no other structure. A large red cushion was placed on the highest platform. It was the seat of the sect leader of the Xiaolian temple. When Hyalbul sat on the red cushion, about a dozen old monks came in and sat down on the platform just right below. After them, the demon blood monks and other monks attended one after another. When all the monks from the Xiaolian temple had entered the full moon hall, the doors were firmly shut. In addition, iron shutters came down from the windows. Thud. Thud. All doors leading to the outside were closed. The full moon hall is now completely isolated. The head of Hyalbul's 10 monks asked Hyalbul, "Did you gather all the disciples because of the assassin?" It was Hukum who requested this. What? Hukum? He said he had a secret plan to find the assassin. A secret plan? Can we trust him? Well, since he said that he is even willing to risk his own life, he must be confident about his plan. I'm looking forward to it. The old monk shook his head. He did not like Hukum very much. He hated that Hukum's prowess relies on manipulating the human mind. But apart from that, he knew that the ability of Hukum was outstanding. When all the exits were closed, Hukum appeared. But he wasn't the only one. 3 children were following him. 2 boys and 1 girl. They were the wolf children. To be precise, they were the survivors among the wolf children. The moment the restriction on their brain was lifted, most of the children died by bleeding from all of their 7 orifices. It was the price of releasing the prohibition that was naturally formed to protect the body. But 3 of them survived. All the surviving children had abnormal abilities. By removing the restriction on the demonic art of Guanyin, the latent characteristics of children were greatly opened up. A sense as sharp as an animal and a mysterious ability that cannot be explained in words. Hukum was confident that they'd be able to find the assassin. Hukum gave the command. He's definitely among us. Find him.